when you use the word club, it really means club. It's like, like a club of people that come together. The scene is alive. It's like electricity. It's out there. In New York City with the jazz community, with musician community, it's so powerful that all you have to do is create a capacitor to conduct it in, and it'll fill.
Yeah. Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. You know who you are. And that was Spike Wilner, pianist and jazz club owner, talking about the scene in New York, the community in New York, how it's alive and it's like electricity. It just has to be captured. Folks, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, then you know that I generally try to put up a new episode every couple of weeks, and the conversations are a long-form, wide-ranging, deep-digging, hopefully, conversations with creative people, often musical, and often in some way related to jazz, although not always. As you may have noticed, I have a kind of jazz heart that beats inside of a commercial body. Yeah, that's right, I have a commercial body. I said that. In any case, my last episode was a conversation that I had with my dad the day after the presidential election in the United States. We were in France, and we sat down and consoled one another in a hotel room in Paris and told each other it was going to be okay. And we also kind of agreed that the most important thing was to keep doing good work, to keep making music and making things and connecting with people. That was our responsibility. And I did feel a certain kind of ease after that conversation. Nonetheless, for a while, I didn't know who to talk to or what to ask them following that. I just kind of came up short, and so I didn't put up another episode since November 8th. And as the new year approached, I started to think about what I wanted to talk about this year on this podcast. One word just kept coming up again and again to me, and that was the idea of community. One of the motivators, one of the things that has driven me thus far has been the personal journeys that people go on, the choices that they make for personal reasons, and the kind of questions that we all ask ourselves privately and that allow us to find our voices and ultimately make a contribution. And I'm still totally connected to those questions, but at least to get started this year, I want to look at the role of community in being able to find our individual voices, in supporting individual voices, and in contextualizing those voices. I'm coming to these conversations with a new energy and a reinforced belief that this is important, that people are doing important work out here, that it's not just about self-expression, but it's about real communion between people. So the first conversation of the year is with Spike Wilner, jazz pianist, owner, and manager of Smalls and Mezzrow, two of the most vital, significant, important, hip clubs on the scene. Spike was a great interview. I hoped that he would be, and I figured if he was willing to really speak truthfully about the role of the jazz club owner, the kinds of questions he deals with, how it is to be both a working musician and also the gatekeeper for so many other working musicians, that we would have something revelatory, and it was nothing less than that. He spoke with enormous dignity and also total candor. We met during the day at one of his clubs in the West Village called Mezzrow. We're in the underground. We're in the jazz cave, and we're talking the talk. Spike, we're sitting in a pretty rare place. We're sitting in an empty jazz club during the day. This is, to me, something that I romanticize. I like it. I associate it with sound checks and the occasional gig, but this is like where you live. This is your life, is spending time during the day in empty jazz clubs.
Yeah. Next February will be my 10th year as the operational manager of Smalls Jazz Club, and Mezzrow's starting its third year soon. Yes, I've spent a lot of time in empty clubs, but it's really just a business. So, it's about keeping an area clean, getting deliveries, lots of coordination with liquor deliveries, and then repairs and logistics. Thank God I have Mitch Borden, who really handles all that stuff in a great way. And then, my end, I'm just doing a lot of correspondence with the musicians and scheduling the dates and paying bills mostly. It's like a lot of paying bills.
How does all of that square with kind of what you set out to do when you first discovered jazz?
Well, I honest to God never set out to own a jazz club, that's for sure. You know, in high school I had a great jazz program. I spent a few years in St. Louis, Missouri when I was a kid because of my dad's job, and ended up going to high school there. And at this high school was Peter Martin, who's playing today, and Todd Williams, and Steve Kirby was there. And
in St. Louis?
This was all like a great St. Louis scene. Chris Thomas and Neil Kane and Jeremy Davenport. And so this was like a group of kids that I was hanging with at that time, and it really got me started into jazz in a big way. And
but were you born in New York?
Born in Manhattan, yeah. I'm a New York kid.
It's kind of funny that leaving New York is what turned you on to the music.
Well, when I was very young, when in second grade I saw this show on TV starring Billy D. Williams, The Life of Scott Joplin. It was like a biopic, you know. That should knock me out. I just, for whatever reason, the whole ragtime thing when I was young was just like, wow, that sounds great. I fell in love with the sound of that music and started playing that very early on, like Joplin's music and ragtime. My dad moved the family to St. Louis for those few years. St. Louis still had a strong ragtime tradition. There were people there that were real scholars of that music. So I kind of got more into that thing. And then it was in high school when the jazz band was there, and then actually that was when Wynton Marsalis was just coming to prominence, and he came around to our school, and it influenced everybody. We were just like, damn.
Can you tell me about that experience, what that was like?
Well, you know, people don't know about Todd Williams too much, and maybe they know his name, but he is a fantastic tenor player and still active musically. At that time, when we were in high school together, we were friends, and he was much more advanced musically than I was at that time. And Wynton Marsalis started to notice him and actually offered him a place in the band. It was just a time when there were a few guys really getting interested in jazz music, modern jazz, at the same time, you know, and Wynton, I think, the way he kind of came back in his way, that was like the resurgence of what they call the Young Lions, that generation, called to attention a lot of guys to that, playing in that style. And for me, it was natural to come back to New York City because I knew I wanted to be back. But I took the opportunity by going to the New School because Arnie Lawrence was auditioning people for his program then.
And that's a pretty legendary class that you were in.
I was very lucky to get into this class where a lot of the guys that are today basically very prominent jazz artists. So, you know, and Arnie kind of put that together, handpicked about 30 students for the first class, myself included. Larry Goldings was there, and Peter was there, Bernstein, and you had, you know, so many guys came through the program at that time. You know, Samuel Hell was there, Joe Strasser, Jesse Davis came through, Roy Hargrove was there, Chris Potter came through. All the guys from that band, the Blues Travelers were there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The Spin Doctors, all those guys were there. They all came from the New School class where they were playing at that time. This was like the 80s, 1986 was when I was there.
When I think about that time, the idea of that sort of jazz education program was totally new. It was unheard of.
Yeah, it was actually when it actually existed, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then what happened was, unfortunately, the academic, quote unquote, you know, structure was imposed upon it, and it just couldn't sustain. It was really Arnie's vision. But he had it working for about a good 3 years there, where he would take 30 young musicians and put them in a room with, you know, Donald Byrd, put them in the room with, you know, Milt Jackson, put them in the room with Cedar Walton, put them in the room with Ram Ramirez, Art Blakey. I mean, these are guys that we were just in school with, and he would bring them by and we would hang and play. Like Jimmy Cobb was doing the Jimmy Cobb rhythm class, which was basically like Jimmy Cobb playing drums.
Yeah.
And you could play with Jimmy Cobb.
Yeah.
If you could, you know, like it was just like that was the class. But it was an unbelievable lesson. And actually, a guy like Pete Bernstein, for example, who was in that class, ended up a lifelong relationship with Jimmy Cobb, playing in his band
Right.
Just now. They were just over at the Jazz Standard. So relationships had never ended. Brad Meldau was there, you know, it was a good friend of ours there, you know. So it was quite an environment. In my case, too, I also became very involved with Barry Harris's class and his workshops, which not everyone took part in, but there was, you know, it's kind of in New York City, you have a very strong bebop tradition.
Sure.
And there's kind of a very strong conservative element of musicians that exist in the city that are adherents to this doctrine. as their aesthetic for the music. And even though the numbers have dwindled, I think they're still quite stalwarts. I was in there with Barry. It was just like learning his harmonic language was amazing. To finally, at first when I went to his classes, I was so baffled by whatever he was talking about.
The diminished sixth thing.
Yeah, his diminished sixth system and just how he thought about harmony, everything. And then after a couple of years, something clicked and I totally understood everything he was saying. And from that point on, I could just really dig him so deeply in terms of his harmony and how it applies to not just himself, but classical harmony. It's very connected. The whole thing is the same. So it just kind of opened me up. And then, as far as bebop itself is concerned, that's still like the music of my heart. But, I don't ascribe to any kind of fanatical conservatism. I believe that jazz music should really be more about finding yourself personally and going there all the time. And that doesn't necessarily mean adhering to tradition. At the same time, you have to be fully immersed in tradition to be able to play that way. So it's a catch-22 between guys who are too immersed in it and therefore trapped in it, or guys who are too disdainful from it, therefore disconnected from it, therefore kind of invalidated. And as much as that might be controversial, it's just the way it is. It's like, to me, you study, you play, and then finally you just play what you are. And that's all you need to do at that point, because you've made it. If you're yourself in this music, then you're a genius, you're original, and that's all you have to do. There doesn't have to be much more than that.
Mm-hmm. What was the role of the clubs in the scene when you came back here to go to school? When I was waiting for the interview, I was looking around at the stuff on the walls, and I couldn't, avoid seeing that you've got these 2 framed calendars from Bradley's on the walls. That must have been a pretty significant place for you.
Well, the truth about Bradley's is that I was just too young to really be in that scene at that time. I went to Bradley's quite often to listen to music, but I was like, I was in my early 20s when Bradley's was in its heyday. So that was a pretty intense scene there, I have to say. That was like the top jazz artists of that time hanging out hard, really hanging out and partying, and also playing for each other in a way that was super intense. I mean, so it was very concentrated, super cliquish. When you meet people who were really from that era, man, they were having a good fucking time. They were hedonists, they loved it. They loved to stay out late. They loved to hang as hard as possible. And they loved jazz, and the jazz was on a high level. If I walked in there, no one knew who the fuck I was. I just had to keep my mouth shut and just
watch it.
Yeah, because I got to hear, Hank Jones Trio with Billy Higgins and Ray Drummond, and I got to hear Kirk Lightsey all the time, and I got to hear Tommy Flanagan Duo on a Tuesday night for no cover, and I got to hear Barry in there so much, and Kenny Barron, Kenny Werner, my teacher at the time, was playing there, and I heard later as it got, towards the end of the Bradley's era, that's when they started having drums, and Roy Hargrove became very involved. That was something. And then I got to sit in there a couple times. Jesse Davis invited me to sit in with him, so I did get to play a little bit at Bradley's. But, for me, the hangs that we were involved in, my generation of guys, so I'm talking about guys at that time who were in their early 20s, was like the Village Gate.
Yep.
Rafi Dlugoff and his dad, Art Dlugoff. That was a great New York jazz club, multi-tiered.
Rafi's dad ran that place?
Art Dlugoff is a very famous jazz guy. He's one of the
I never put that together.
In the pantheon of jazz club owners, along with, the guy from the Vanguard, Max Gordon, and also, the guy that ran Cafe Society, Harvey Josephson, and there's. Jazz club ownership is a deep thing that people maybe don't understand in the tradition of this music, but the great jazz club owners were not. They were very, very interesting human beings, seriously involved. And jazz club owners have a bad rap, everyone thinks they're assholes.
Well, so this is what's so interesting to me about you, man. You live on both sides of this question.
I'm a Gemini. Yeah.
You're a player, you're a musician, you just came off the road yourself. Mm-hmm. You know what it's like to go through the whole thing, to get paid, to get booked, and on the other hand, you're the guy that people have to deal with to get booked and to get paid.
Yeah. Well, the thing is it's like, here's the thing. You want to gig at Smalls or at Mezzrow, you have to play at least as good as me, if not better. If you can play better than me, you can have a gig at Smalls and Mezzrow, you know. There's a lot of guys that are playing at my clubs, obviously, so, you know, that's the criterion. Though. But if you're not that good, my feeling is like, you know, everyone gets mad at me about booking. You know, everyone's pissed off because every musician wants a gig. Everybody thinks that they're the shit, and you know they got to have their date. And if they don't have it, they're real mad. You know.
Sure.
And they think I'm sitting here in some room like listening to CDs and judging guys. Oh, he's good, he's bad, he's good, he's bad. I don't do anything like that. Because first of all, I'm a professional jazz musician. Yeah. So along with me and anyone that plays this music professionally, within hearing a few measures of a guy play, know where he's at. Everyone does. So anyone that says otherwise is a liar. Jazz musicians know. It's the only art form maybe around today where you cannot bullshit. A lot of guys do. But if you want to be really in the minds of the artists themselves, you have to really be able to deliver real playing.
Yeah.
These guys out here that are in New York City have heard everything. They know. You know what I mean? It's like the criterion is very high here. The bar is set high. It's traditionally been that high, and it has not changed. My thing is like, if you're getting a gig at Mezzrow or Smalls, it's because you've been invited in to play.
Well, how much of that is also, like I had heard over the years, musicians are encouraged to hang. The more they are sort of seen and become part of the community, the more likely it is that they would be invited to play. Do you think about it in those terms, too?
This is how I look at it. It's like, ultimately, it comes down to my judgment of who I think should be appropriate for the room. Smalls has a different criterion than Mezzrow, for one thing, so people have to understand that. Smalls has been always traditionally a club for younger players. Mm-hmm. You know, the bread is what it is. The hours are what they are. It's like, if you want to be a part of that, you got to just get your ass down there and hang out and play, period, and impress. Mm-hmm. It's no way around it, you know. I don't care what your CD sounds like. Nobody does. It's just like, get on the bandstand, play, you know. I mean, look, Smalls is a place where, like, you have guys like who have residencies that have been there for years. Take a guy like Ari Honig, who's conducted his gig there every Monday night for years. You know, we've always supported Ari. And Ari, in turn, from just a flat-out business perspective, has always delivered a consistent level of business to justify why he should be in this position. Like, he's a great artist, and we love him. He's a great friend of mine. But he also is like, puts his money where his mouth is with his shows, you know? So the reason why I'm saying that is that what I see is sometimes you'll have young guys who will come on the scene. They'll hang out, they'll sit in, they'll play well. People will, like, you know, guys will be at the bar drinking beers, and one guy will play a solo, and you'll say, whoa, who was that motherfucker? Oh, I don't know, he just, you know, a little bit of talking, start seeing more of him. Next thing you know, Ari Honig's hired him for his show. So all of a sudden, this cat's, like, playing with Ari Honig's band, and everyone's like, oh, that's the cat that I heard. Yeah, he's good. You know, like, it's, how did he get there? Did he go to Ari with his CD? No, it's just like, next thing you know, he's not only playing with Ari, he's also being called to play with Lage Lund's band or blah, 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 down the road. Till finally, hey, man, what's up? It sounded great last night. Oh, by the way, would you like to bring a project in? That would be great. You know, like, that's how it works, honestly. There's no real way around it. Now, if you're an artist, say, like, I have relationships with artists like Alan Broadbent or Joanne Brackeen, Harold Mayburn, that's a different story, you know.
Yeah.
I'll take care of artists who are already legendary class. Everyone gets the respect here.
Sure.
But if you're a younger guy and you want to come play, and we never heard you, I mean, look, I'll put it this way. If you bug me enough, you'll get your gig. That's the other answer for musicians. Like, if you just hammer away at a guy day after day, it may take months, he will relent.
Even in setting up this interview, I was sort of cautiously persistent with you because I know that you must be getting hammered all the time.
No, it's good that you do. I mean, what I tell guys, honestly, is I'll see a musician that I know, because my I get so inundated with everything.
Yeah.
So I might be at Mezzrow on a certain night, and let's say some musician a fine pianist who's either an associate, a friend, a guy who can really play that everyone likes, and I say to him, man, I haven't seen you in a while. Would you like to do a show at Mezzrow? Oh, man, I'd love to, but I'm afraid to bug you. I'll always say, look, you're on the invited list, so that you're invited to email me, in other words. Because tomorrow I might forget about this conversation, but if you email me, I will remember and we can set something up. Yeah. So here's my invitation to, you know, let's make this happen.
Right.
On the other hand, if I am not inviting you to email me, like I said, you can always get a gig. You really can if you're persistent forever. But I don't think it works. One time I had a conversation recently with a young singer who's been sitting in down here, and she's been hanging out, and she's very, very talented, beautiful voice, very nice person, you know. And one evening I complimented her on her singing when I heard her at a session. And the next day she approached me about coming for a gig at Mezzrow. And my response was just like, I didn't want to say yes because I was afraid that it would actually hurt her to do a gig here.
Like she's not ready.
When she's just not ready, and there's so much competitive nature that sometimes getting your gig is not the best thing for you. Because so many people are either going to see you and ignore you and then think you suck, or come down and maybe hear you and be very judgmental because they're already so angry.
That is not them on the gig?
Yeah, or that they also want this. Like, why is this person getting this and I'm not getting this? And it's just there's a lot of negativity through ego.
Has that changed, do you think, over the years, or was it like that when you were coming up too?
No, I think it's always been the case. As long as you have human beings, you have ego problems. That's our thing that we have to deal with in life. It's just like, but as artists, you have to be realistic about what it means. What I'm saying is like, ego problems are ego problems. I have serious ego problems, personal ones, and have grappled with them. But in the context of Smalls and Mezzrow, I try to be as selfless as I can. You know, it's a very humbling position to have. People don't realize, because it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a huge amount of work, and it's a very subservient role in a lot of ways. I'm setting up for guys, I'm paying guys, I'm getting yelled at sometimes by guys when I screw up. You know, and I am an artist. I'm a professional musician, and I can play along with these guys. It's not a competition, but I have a lot of confidence in myself as an artist in my own right. And hopefully that will be what I do most of the time. You know, it was what I did before Smalls, but it's been good to be humbled in that way.
I mean, you talk about being in the service of the music. Obviously, anybody who makes a life in the music is to some degree in the service of the music, but you are having to maintain your chops and all your personal stuff, but you're trying to keep this scene going.
Well, the scene is alive. You know, the scene is not dead by any means. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like electricity. You know, like it's out there, and when you create a capacitor, you can draw it in, and it'll charge for a while. It'll hold the charge. You know what I mean? In New York City with the jazz community, with musician community, it's so powerful that all you have to do is create a capacitor to conduct it in, and it'll fill.
Yeah.
But you have to know how to do that right. You know, you have to understand what that means to do that, and that's why there are failures. It's a strange art to run a club in the sense that like you want to control who comes in, who doesn't, but you still need to make it comfortable. But as far as the jazz musician artist community, it's very strong. You can still make that. I mean, it's still there.
You're just channeling it. You're just finding an outlet for it. You're finding a place for people to gather.
When you use the word club, it really means club. It's like, you know, like a club of people that come together to be in the club. You know, it's not about a performance space where you sit for an hour set and then are escorted out and then shuffled in a new set and then out. That's I think that's like a very corporate way of doing the thing, because that's not how those old clubs were, like Village Gate. That was just family time. That was all the people in the family hanging out, having a good time all day. And it worked. It was loose.
Yeah. Maybe
there was some money lost. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe somebody got too many free drinks. It didn't matter. Shit was just like alive. Everyone happy to see each other, slapping each other. You know, love. The love was strong. This family of people hanging out together. And Art DeLugoff made it happen. And he was smart because he had his comedy club upstairs and a big theater downstairs. But this environment on the terrace, and he always had top guys in there playing, you know, the best guys. I mean, that was...
Yeah, when I talked to Larry Goldings, he talked about how one of the things that Arnie did was to let the students from the new school run a jam session on Sundays, and that became the sort of the way the music school interacted with the community and vice versa.
Yeah, that was my gig.
Yeah.
I was the guy. I ran that jam session every Sunday at the Village Gate for probably 6 years. I held on to it. I didn't want to let go, you know. They finally pried it from my dead cold hands, and then the gate closed, you know, and then Smalls opened. It was a very interesting sequence.
As Lenny Bruce once said, speaking through the character Father Flotsky, sometimes when the good road is closed, the bad road will never be open. I don't really know what that means, but I do know that the village gate closed, and shortly thereafter Smalls opened. Folks, you don't have to open a window or close a door to subscribe to the Third Story podcast. Just visit third-story.com, sign up for the mailing list, or subscribe directly on the iTunes Music Store or wherever you like to listen to your podcast. You can get another episode delivered directly into your ear holes every time it comes out. Speaking of sonic delivery, Spike Wilner eventually became a regular at Smalls in the West Village. Here he talks about the benefits of the underground hideout, how in many ways they were bolstered by the fact that nobody in the city really knew what was going on. There were literally musicians living in the club. As he says, it was completely open, no restraints. But following September 11th, the club closed and Spike left town. He moved to Paris and he reset. When he came back to New York, he found himself back in the thick of it in the West Village, helping his friend Mitch run and book the newly reopened Smalls Jazz Club. How does he think about booking the club? How has success changed the dynamic of the club? And how has his decision to think of himself not only as a club booker, but as an archivist, documenting historically important material, changed the way he thinks about his role?
So I was not old enough or in New York to see the gate, but I did see the first generation of Smalls. It was really interesting. I mean, obviously it was alcohol-free, basically. It was real cheap to get in. It really felt like my memory of it was like we were hiding out down there, like people didn't really know that it was happening.
Yeah. Well, Mitch got that basement in '94 and opened it. It was very inexpensive rent, you know. And he contacted his cousin to say, can you get me some jazz musicians? Who in turn reached out and called like Grant and Pete, and the right calls, but all guys in their 20s essentially.
Yeah.
And Mitch has such a big heart, and he just tried to do everything from his heart, just like with his just bohemian, crazy eclecticness, but also his love for bebop. And Smalls became just like, it was for kids. It was like, it was like no cover charge was $10. Bring your own beer. Wow. Smoking in this kind of funky ass old restaurant looking thing that just went up 24/7 because he tried to get his liquor license and couldn't get it. He lost his money and didn't try again. But the BYOB thing became kind of a good idea, and he kind of created a rec room down there for college students. It was really just like a college hang. Young, 18, 19, underage, 16, 17. I mean, and then just it became a haven for, older guys that were just gone down on their luck, had nowhere else to play, and they just lived there. Not just play, live. I mean, they had nowhere else to go. Homeless, kind of.
Huh.
And homeless musicians sleeping in there. And Mitch just...
Like who?
Well, like you had Frank Hewitt in there for a long time. You had Tommy Turrentine living there for a while. You had maybe Billy Kay down there for a while. You had, just, not to mention some young guys down there living there that didn't have any else to go.
Just crashing there.
Yeah, but in some cases, like there for months at a time, if not, it just there, like it was part of the thing. It was just like he'd give keys away to the club and you just had a key. I had a key to the club. It was completely open, like it was just, there was no restraints there. But what happened was that, first of all, there was a lot of problems. One being that it was not in any way close to being currently up to code. It had a water-cooled air conditioning system from 1940 that used insane amount of water and was basically illegal. It's still going, there was only one bathroom right in the front of the club, there was this huge kitchen in the back that was completely not used, that was just infested with roaches and, but the real problem was after 9/11. What happened was once after 9/11 kicked in, about a year after, that's when all the rents in the city went insane. The whole city transformed from these little mom and pop bookstores, restaurants, boutiques, crazy, stupid shit. I mean, there used to be so many little stores all over New York and little cafes, and right? Because it was just not that expensive to rent a space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Smalls was $800 a month when Mitch was doing it, for a basement, shitty, fucked up basement in Greenwich Village. But then when, after post 9/11, it went literally to $8,000. It went from $800 to $8,000 as the current market. And he couldn't do it. He didn't want to do it. And so he moved his operation over to Fat Cat, and another guy came in and took over Smalls, like we said, the Brazilian par,
Yeah.
That led it into where I came in.
So you came in and took it back over from the Brazilians, and meanwhile the scene had sort of shifted over to Fat Cat, right? There was the...
Right, when Smalls closed, that was kind of a tragic event in my life. I couldn't deal with it. I kind of split. I went to Europe and tried to be an expat there. And
Where'd you go?
Went to Paris, yeah. It was just like, I didn't want to be in New York. Like, after 9/11 and Smalls closing, for me, it was just like I was done with New York at that moment. I couldn't. It was unbearable.
What was it like to go to Europe?
France is cool. I love Paris,
Yeah.
I really like Paris. I still, to this day, keep going there. Yeah, it's great. I think Paris is the only other place in the world that you really have a good jazz feeling, like a community of hanging people, like Jazz Hang. It's good. It's good clubs there.
So how long were you there?
Well, it was on and off for about 5 years, kind of back and forth. But right at the end there, about 2004, what happened was Smalls, another guy took over that space, the basement, 183 West 10th Street, and put a lot of money into it. He was a Brazilian guy, and he completely overhauled the place, put in new bathrooms, put in the correct fire extinguishers, new air conditioning system, put it completely up to code. Because the thing was that after 9/11, the fire department became much more strict about places being open without being, like the kind of place Smalls was just wouldn't make it anymore today's New York. Like they would come down way too hard and shut your ass down. This was, in the 90s, it was still like mafia was still kind of running the village. It was still like the very end of the mafia era. And you could get away with shit if you paid the right guys and blah, 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 blah. But after 9/11 became like police state thing where they're just like, you got to be doing exactly right or it's just, and it costs a lot. But this Brazilian guy did it. He got it all done, of course. And he also got the hardest part, which was a full liquor license, 4 a.m. license. And so he started his bar there, called it the Rio Bar. But it wasn't popular at all. It failed miserably. It kind of might have been a drug front. It was just a weird-ass little joint. And everyone that came in wanted Smalls, and as soon as they figured out it wasn't Smalls anymore, they left. So after about a year of that, maybe max, he went and found Mitch at Fat Cat and said, look, let's reopen Smalls together. I'll own it, and you just book it and manage it. So Mitch was like, sure, why not? That's when he came to me, and he said, we need a piano in there. What do you think? And I had my Steinway up at my house. I said, well, I'll put it in. Let me do regular Sunday night with it, and you can use it for the rest of the week. So it was a good deal.
So that's how that started?
More or less, yeah. I mean, I kind of had done that in the past with other venues, put pianos in there to get steadies. But with Mitch, Mitch and I had been already friends from the old days, of course, and he knew that I was, could help him. So I brought in that Steinway. And then shortly after that, this guy was just done with the club. He couldn't take the jazz thing, and it wasn't making any money anyway. And so he told Mitch he wanted to sell his share. He wanted to sell the business back to Mitch, essentially. And Mitch talked to me about it, because Mitch wasn't in the position to have it financially. So, I wanted to do it I was afraid I was going to lose my gig. That's what I was kind of mostly...
Your Sunday night gig?
Yeah. Like, that was my concern at the time, that the club would close, someone else would take over, might become a whatever.
And then you're not going to have a residence.
And I'm not going to have a gig in New York anymore, and the whole fucking thing's go to shit. And so I was just like, that's why I wanted to do it. I had another buddy of mine at the time, a college buddy, and he wanted to become involved with a bar as well. And even though I wasn't 100% sold on the idea, it seemed to make the most sense. And me and this other guy and Mitch kind of went in, and I got a loan, and we bought the business back. As soon as I started that, my idea was to just immediately let Mitch just kind of bring back the thing we had. At the same time, it was a kind of a new era, because the rent was $8,000 a month. We had a full liquor license. So it wasn't going to be the exact arrangement as before, where you pay $10 and hang all night. It couldn't work anymore. We just needed to sell drinks. We needed to make enough money to pay the rent, And so we made the cover what it is still to this day, which is 20 and 10 after midnight. And musicians basically free. And we made our drinks affordable as hell and got the jam sessions going. And slowly but surely, the cast came back to do it. And, and I decided, I took over the booking from Mitch. Mitch used to do the booking, and I just felt that I wanted to do it,
Yeah.
And just because I wanted to try to make it also a broader spectrum. Mitch, God bless him, is a brilliant and beautiful person, and he has the best insight into everything you can imagine. He's a genius, you know. But I felt that I had a better grasp of the pulse of the scene and could make better judgments on who to let in that might be different than what his taste would allow him to do.
How much of your thinking was informed by the kinds of artists that would fill the room up, and how much of your thinking was just, you know, making sure that you served a broader spectrum, or that you got the cats in that maybe weren't being recognized, or, you know, what was your thinking?
At that time, I wasn't thinking at all about filling the room. It wasn't an issue. I still don't think about that really in Smalls.
Because
it's just contrary to our philosophy, you know.
But meanwhile, every time I go down there, it seems it's packed.
Nowadays it is, but it wasn't always like that. People see it now and think are amazed by the crowds and the lines, and so are we. We keep reminding them it's only 60 seats in there too, so it's not a huge space. So, of course, you know, the Vanguard sits 130. You know, Jazz Standard I think sits over 200. You know, it's Dizzy's must be over 200 as well. So it's a very small space. You know, it's not until recently that it was packed like that all the time. And knock on wood, it's a good problem to have, but it's also kind of changing the character of the club, because in the old days it used to be you could just come in any time and hang out and chill out, and, you know, it was a cool little hang. And, you know, like we had our cat down there for a long time, but as it just got packed like that, it kind of became not the same character of Smalls as it used to. But now you can find Smalls still, I tell people, but it really has to be late at night. Like, come late. If you come at 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, it's just too early. You're just going to see tourists, and it's going to be a crowd. If you come at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning if you can, and see it. Then you'll get a much more close idea of what Smalls is all about in terms of the musicians and the hang. Mm-hmm. But in those days, I never thought about it. You know, I just thought about guys that need to play and how to make that happen, you know, and respect for guys that had already been like legacy guys at Smalls. You know, at first I was very concerned with making sure all the guys that had already put in long, you know, residencies at the old Smalls were still honored at the new Smalls. Mm-hmm. However, at the same time, I also had to open it up stylistically. Some other guys, you know, that were maybe not in favor with the hardcore Smalls old guard.
Do you think it's fair to say that there is a Smalls scene, in as much as you could say there is an uptown scene, or there was a downtown scene, or, you know, is there a Smalls scene?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there is now. I mean, right now it's the scene is, I mean...
But can that be identified in musical terms? Or is it in personal terms?
I think the one thing about Smalls, and everyone will agree, is that it's basically a bebop club, you know, and that's that. You know, it's like everything gets played there to a certain degree, but we don't really tolerate, like, Brazilian music down there, for example. Not that we don't like Brazilian music, but it's just, or we don't really like rock bands in there ever, you know, or too bluesy or something. You know, I know it sounds very, very close-minded, but bebop has a broad range. I mean, bebop it just has to have that vibe, jazz vibe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, in the old days, Smalls was really hardcore, like that Barry Harris thing, you know, kind of almost to a T. And then that became very, it turned a lot of people off in a way, you know. It's very, so strict. My role has been to be like, you know, the middle path, like Buddha. Just, you know, stride the center down the road, try to be compassionate, try not to let this shit get me too down, you know, and be as fair as possible, be as transparent as I can with the money. Like, I don't want to hide anything from anybody. It's like, yeah, it's $20 cover. There's, you know, 40 seats on the floor, another 20 in the, you know, it's like $1,200. We pay a bartender, we pay a bar back, we pay a manager, we have 3 bands a night. You know, it's like, there it is. You know, like, where's the money that you would like to have coming from, you know? If you don't like it, to find another club to play in, honestly. Like, you know, honestly, like, this is the deal. I'm sorry, you know? And some guys did just say, fuck you, man. And they're gone. They never play there. Which is fine with Smalls, because in the old days, Smalls was just like I said, Smalls in the old days was just a dirty-ass dive bar, hang for kids and bebop guys and old junky jazz musicians. And, you know, it was just, you could go there and meet girls and have a great time, hang to all hours, just partying. You know, it was so fun, you know, obviously. Yeah. It's like Fat Cat is now, really, in a lot of ways. Not as Rec Room-ish, but just a little bit more hedonistic kind of, you know, but also, and the music was cool. You know, it was like Omer Avital, and it was Kurt Rosenwinkel and Jason Linder and you know, of course, Sasha Perry and Ari Roland and those guys. And they all sounded pretty good. A lot of those guys have become famous now, you know. At the time, they were just 20-year-olds playing jazz, you know, and that was that.
Yeah.
Trying to make it.
At some point, you decided to put a camera up and live stream it and sell subscriptions and, you know, take that aspect of the business to the world at large.
In 2007, when I finally became the guy running the place, the very first thing that I believe very strongly and do to this day is that everything at Smalls is of historical importance for the future. We don't know what yet, to what the ramifications may be, but it would be foolish to just let it go. And the capacity to, to document is so easy now, technologically speaking, that it's, again, would be complete idiocy to not take advantage of that, regardless of what people might think. And that's always been my perspective. Like, I'm an archivist, this is historical, I'm the guy that has to do this, it's my responsibility, period. So I started to record everything and keeping a log of who was on the gig, keeping it very clear, marked. At that time, there was a club called, it's still around, Knitting Factory.
Sure.
And that guy, I remember, tried to do a live stream long before anyone else even thought of that shit. Like, it was just, I read about it, I was like, wow, what a great idea. Like, you know. The other thing I remember is a story that I read about John Hammond, the producer, and the way he discovered Count Basie, which was that Count Basie was playing at that club in Kansas City with his band in the 30s, and the guy at the club decided to put a wire in there and just do a live broadcast from the club of Basie's band and da-da-da. You know, and it was like AM radio, and that shit just went everywhere, across the country. So John Hammond's just driving in Chicago, and he's got his car on, and he tunes in there and hears Basie. Guy's like, live from Kansas City right now, blah, blah. He turns his car around and just like drives to Kansas City to see this with his own eyes, you know, from Chicago, he's driving to Kansas City. The idea being that somehow they put this thing in their club that put the music out there, and there was this amazing result. And I believe the same thing. Like, just keep transmitting it out there, and people are receiving it, and they're being affected by it, and it's changing their lives, and they do respond, you know?
Have you felt that in human terms? I mean, do you have people coming to the club that it's clear that they've been watching the videos or that they're aware of it?
Well, for one thing, see, we started the live stream in 2007 right away with a very, very simple kind of security camera, and it caught on right away. People really liked it, you know? And so we kind of kept that going, and as our technology kind of grew, we started learning a lot more about streaming and how to stream properly, and it's still a kind of tricky thing, honestly. It's not a perfect science, and unless you really have a big kind of thing behind you, it's hard, you know, on your own trying to do it. You can kind of do it, but I think we got a pretty good system at this point. So
and who does it? Because it seems live switched sometimes, right? Like people do a little switching on it.
No, I set it up so that it has a kind of just a timer on that, so that it just 3 camera angles, and it just every 15 seconds does a fade from one to the next. Little trick, but it just kind of makes it so it's not as monotonous. And then the sound we try to keep good. When I began to realize how popular the stream was, that we began to focus on that. And also, of course, the archive was growing, you know. I mean, I started recording in 2007, everything that was played there. So by 2009, we're already talking about a lot of shows.
Where is it archived? Where is it living? In a server somewhere?
Yeah, well, currently now it's evolved into what we call Smalls Live, which is my digital media company for taking care of media from Smalls and all, like, our live streams. I decided 2 things. One was that because of the nature of the economics of Smalls and Mezzrow, that unless we expand to a global level, these clubs are in danger. Also, just because I know myself how little time, I mean, it's just like I'm in my 10th year. Mitch has been here 22 years. It's like I got a lot of good, dedicated young people working, but it's also, you know, I'd like to have it subsidized to a point where I know it's not going to be in danger. And I think that's entirely possible with the internet, you know, that we can have people supporting what we do by becoming what we call members, you know. Mm-hmm. At first I tried making the live stream a subscription thing, and that kind of was a failure, and I realized I had made a mistake with it. So we changed it back to a free live stream, which it is to now. But the other bigger component of the live streaming thing is the archive of the live stream. So as I say, we've been recording everything since 2007, so we're sitting on like literally 12,000 recordings at this point, and like 1,500 or plus musicians, maybe, or closing on 2,000 guys. And so we did 2 things. One was we built this amazing website smallslive.com. I have a great tech partner and some other people involved. And from smallslive.com, of course, you get your scheduling information for the club, but it also has the musician database with all the archives. So you can go there and search anyone you like by either their name, their instrument, or the date they played, and it'll give you an event page with who was there, bios of the musicians, the other dates they've played there, and then more importantly also the live video of that show. So we knew we wanted to make this archive available to the people, but we weren't sure how we could properly pay the musicians for that. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of discussions with musicians at that time. We did some kind of like what they call, I guess they'd call it in politics the town hall meeting style things. We did a few of those. We also met with 802 to talk to union guys to see what they thought.
What do the musicians think of it, just on the face of it?
Well, see, I don't know what everyone thinks about it, but I can just say from like reaching out to guys, and like I said, we had a few meetings at Smalls where musicians were open to come and just discuss what would be the fairest thing. And the ideas we came up with came out of those meetings. So the arrangement for live streaming that they felt, and myself included as a musician running this, is that for one thing, anything that's earned on it is split 50-50 between the company and the artist. In other words, the percentage of earnings is simply a split. That we're partners between venue and artist, we're equal partners in creating this event. So therefore, from that perspective, in terms of like money being earned, it's 50-50. Mm-hmm. In terms of the content itself, the recorded thing that's left, that's 100% the property of the artist. Not only their personal property, they can do anything they like with it, including sell it, including putting it out with another label if they like. They can do anything they want with it, with the exception that if they're going to use Smalls in the promotion of what they're doing, then we have to somehow also have an agreement. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to even pay us, but we have to be involved somehow to some degree. Not that we care that much, but I should explain how the membership works. If you just want to watch the live streams from Smalls and Mezzrow, you can become a free member by just signing up with an email, and you'll get a confirmation, and bang, you can just watch the live stream as much as you like. Mm-hmm. With the audio video archive, we ask that you become a supporting member, which means $10 a month. Mm-hmm. So for some people, that's too much money. Others, what we hope is they understand that the $10 a month that they're getting is really a support of the clubs and the artists themselves. And the way it works is this project that we've come up with, which is what I'm describing. We call it the Revenue Share Project. But we're trying to create a model for royalty payment that is as fair as possible for the artists and also for the venue. So 50-50 split of anything earned. So every $10 a month subscription that we get, $5 goes towards the musicians, $5 goes towards the...
So $5 goes into a fund that then somehow gets divided?
Exactly. So what we've built into our Smalls Live site is that every musician is already in the database. And so whenever anybody logs in as a subscribing member to watch a video, it records exactly how many minutes of what show gets watched. If it's the Ari Honig trio with, Jonathan Kreisberg and Tivan Pennicott, and somebody goes on and watches that show for 35 minutes, then Ari, Tivan, and Jonathan each get credited 35 minutes. So at the end of the period, you get this thing where there's a total amount of minutes that the archive was watched, and all the users combined, bang, that's our total number. Then each artist will also have an individual number of minutes that they were watched anywhere they exist in the archive. So for example, if you're a guy like, let's say you're Jason Brown, and you're a very popular sideman, and you've played 20 gigs in the last 3 months at Smalls, anytime any of those gigs get listened to by anybody, you're getting minutes credited to you. You're being rewarded for being a popular sideman,
And how are these guys getting paid?
So what happens is that we have what's called a pay period, where a payout, we've done only one so far in the year, but we're about to do our second one. You take the musician's minutes total divided by the total minutes. That gives you a fraction. Mm-hmm. That fraction is equal to your payout of the revenue pool that we've collected. So this year this particular payout will probably have about $7,500 to distribute to the musicians. Mm-hmm. Doesn't sound like a lot, but We collected it from the supporters that we've gotten so far. And what's interesting is like the guys that are the most popular guys, like the guys in the top 40 slots, right? Because you can see who the top guy is. It's science. It's like this guy got listened to the most, this guy next, this, and all the way down. So it's like, if you're a really popular artist, you're going to get paid. And so I remember like the first payout we did, I think about a $5,000 payout. But guys like Ari Honig and Gilad Hexelman, some of the guys that I can tell are really popular artists now, they made around like $150 or something each, for that.
Yep. So it's interesting too, because one of the things that it says to me, just going back to the conversation about how you get a gig at Smalls, getting a gig is not an insignificant thing, because just by walking on that bandstand, you become entered in a database, an archival database.
Exactly.
You become part of a community, and you become part of history. There are no invisible one-offs. I mean, in order to walk on the gig, somebody's got to write you into the archive.
That's right. Yeah.
Inscribe you into the book of life.
Well, in a sense, yes, Rabbi. But it's like the thing is like we made it mandatory that if you play a gig at Smalls, you become a Smalls Live guy. It's like a record company, really, is what it is. It's like you're playing at Smalls, you're doing a live performance, you're also recording an album.
Right.
That's going to be available to the public.
And you see all of this as a possible real income stream that will help to support, underwrite, keep the thing going.
Well, I'll give you an example. Like right now, we have about 15,000 plus free members, guys, people that just have signed up with their emails to watch the stream as they wish. And we're got about 700 supporting members, which are people who are paying $10 a month to have access to our archive. And every week, of course, we're putting in 35 new shows. And the idea is that they're not buying something, they're supporting something. That's kind of the message we're trying to get across. We also have what's called benefactor memberships, which are between $100 or more, whatever people can choose if they actually want to pay more. And believe it or not, we have a few people who actually have decided that they'd like to give us X amount of dollars a year in support of Smalls Live. And then they have this beneficial, doesn't really give them much privileges more than they can come into the clubs for free as much as they like kind of thing, and we love them forever. But, people believe in it, So 700, that's $7,000 a month revenue that we're making currently as Smalls Live LLC.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a lot, but it pays the cost of, most importantly, our server. You have bandwidth costs, because we have to pay extra money to have the kind of bandwidth we need for the streams. You have the office that we rent. I've just expanded my staff, which I'm a little bit excited about, to about 7 people now working for Smalls Live for the different components that we're doing. And it covers their salaries. So this 700 subscribers that we have right now is actually floating Smalls Live for the most part. It's amazing. The company's kind of operating. We're not really yet making profitable, or, it's not yet putting us in the place we want to be. Now, my feeling is that if we can do 5,000 subscribers worldwide, which would translate into $50,000 a month revenue, which would be divided $25,000 for the artists. The other $25,000 could go to subsidizing club costs. Then you have a game changer, because $25,000 distributed monthly to musicians would actually have some impact on their lives in terms, especially the guys that are the most popular artists in the thing. I can guarantee you, they'd be seeing checks each month that would be far in excess of anything they would make on anywhere.
Yeah.
Spotify's paying guys like 0.83 cents per player.
Yeah.
We already paid guys like Pete Bernstein and Ari for their popularity $100 or something, like shit that they
are not seeing from Spotify.
We're already destroying Spotify in terms of payout. If we really were making some bread, you might be seeing the life of artists being subsidized in a real way. Possibly paying rent, possibly paying medical bills, possibly paying children, whatever. I'm saying, like, real revenue stream for artists. And $25,000 a month added to Smalls and Mezzrow would basically pay our rents here. So from 5,000 worldwide subscribers, we'd be able to really cover the expenses of the clubs to a certain degree, and that would give us, in turn, a lot of flexibility to pay the artist much more for playing here, because we wouldn't be we're so right now handcuffed to like every $20 cover that comes in the room and every drink we sell. But if that pressure was off, where we knew we didn't have to sweat it so much, or we could utilize it in a different way, like paying guys competitively. My dream, people think I'm trying to squeeze guys, but the truth is, my dream is if I could make these clubs pay better than every other jazz club in town, man.
Man is right. Spike Wilner laying out the economics of the jazz club and looking for new opportunities for equitable solutions between the club and the cats. 3 years ago, Spike and Mitch opened Mezzrow, a second club down the street from Smalls. Although it wasn't originally their concept, it became quickly a kind of tribute to Bradley's, the club that had been the scene of so many great musical nights. It was kind of a happy accident, and as he tells the story, you can hear how many stars had to align in order for it to work out. A sympathetic landlord, a strong outpouring in the community of people that came to the defense of the club, and an audience that rose to the occasion, eager for a listening room, a place where they could seriously listen to high-level acoustic music in a small setting. I love how Spike thinks about his role as a kind of vibratory maintenance officer. He talks about coming into the club at night, especially into Smalls to the jam session, and making sure that the right kind of dynamic is happening. He says he has to reach into his source of energy and charge it up, put a positive spin on it. And stick around until the end. It gets really good. I would say the last 90 seconds of this interview are totally worth waiting for. So here we go with the final segment of my conversation with Spike Wilner.
You have developed something in your second club here that it quickly became the favorite room, regardless of...
That's so amazing to me, because
so
I was
many players.
so scared before I opened that people would hate this place. I really was sweating it out. I couldn't sleep at night. Like, the anxiety level leading up to opening Mezzrow was like, I was so happy people liked it,
So why did you decide to do it? What led you to open a second club?
Well, because I told you, Smalls was just so packed all the time.
Yeah.
Mitch and I had been talking about it for a while. Like, we're like, damn, if we could just rent some other spot where we could hold people. 5 years ago, we started noticing crowds, like the old days Smalls. Old days Smalls would be lying around the block. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing that again, and we're just like trying to get people, oh, you got to come back in an hour. We can sell you a ticket if you come back, trying whatever we could do. But we're like losing a lot of customers because we just couldn't accommodate them. So we were on the search for a space. Then one day I was walking down 10th Street, and this space was offered for rent. It was just a basement. It had been a kitchen for the Italian place. I called the the real estate guy, and I came and looked at it, and Mitch looked at it. So the landlord was super cool. It was a miracle, this landlord, this guy. So I called him up, and he was totally amenable to us trying. And he agreed to rent me the space for 4 months with the option for renewal, a 10-year lease, business lease, if I chose to stay. But at the very worst, I could pay 4 months worth of rent and walk away. Of course, I'd lose that money, but it'd be worth not like signing a 10-year lease.
You would be locked into it, yeah.
So during that 4 months is when I applied for our liquor license and went before the community board, and we had to do this huge kind of PR thing where we got, Wynton Marsalis wrote us a letter, and Greg Scholl, the head guy at Lincoln Center, wrote us a letter saying that we are of cultural importance, and we got dozens and dozens and dozens of signatures from the neighbors and people to speak on our behalf. And I think we really impressed the community board, and there was some opposition from the neighborhood, of course. But we got passed for our liquor license. And once that happened, I signed the lease. I was like, okay, now we can. I wouldn't have signed the lease had I not gotten that liquor license, I think. Mm-hmm. I really wanted it to be a bar,
So part of the thinking was this is overflow. This is going to be overflow.
This was going to be a bar where we would just send people to wait until they could fit at Smalls.
So was there initially any music component to it? It'll be a piano room, or how did that
Well, we thought, we'd have some jazz in there, somebody playing or something. We didn't think it would be... We didn't know what to think. It was just going to be like a little joint we could sell some people drinks, say, wait here for an hour, we'll call your number, like at a deli. Number is 41, come on over. And they'd come over and we'd get them, or some shit like that,
Maybe you're playing some music on the box, whatever.
Yeah, or maybe having the stream in here, people could watch, something like that. But then we got into the design of this place, which was so fun. We knocked out some walls. And then the funniest thing was the floors, because we were supposed to do a regular floor, and this guy convinced us to put in marble. It cost a fucking fortune. It was like $10,000. I was like, oh my God, are you insane? But this like craftsman came in and like built this marble floor, and it changed the whole sound in the room because it made this like kind of sonorous thing. And then we realized also like that front room, we exposed those stones. So you got this kind of ball up there of stone. You know what I mean?
Marble and stone, yeah.
Yeah, and so the sound is so nice.
Yeah.
So we had this amazing phenomenon where anyone that's sitting in that front room, all they can hear is music, and then you got this kind of like shaft, and then in here it's like a lounge where people can talk, and they are not affected, and they can hear. It's like an acoustical miracle.
Yeah. So people can talk at the bar, and it doesn't affect the music in the front.
Exactly. It's insane.
But it's all one room. There's no curtain. There's no door.
No, we were even thinking we'd put a velvet curtain here in the middle to separate the
Yeah.
two, but it's just no, we don't need to. I mean, sometimes if it really gets loud, we're shushing people. We have one of the things that I do at Mezzrow is I do my spiel about this being a listening policy. Mezzrow has a listening policy. If you come here to sit down in this club, especially in this front here, you're here to listen to this show, not to gab away. And I've learned a lot about business from, like my manager, JC, who works here, is a great guitar player, but he's also a real smart kind of business guy. And we were discussing how, he always says you can fire your customers, which means that you don't have to let every person in here that comes in. What we're trying to do is just cultivate a listening audience so that the people that want to come to Mezzrow are here because they want to have a concert, like a salon, that's what it is. And we do classical shows here once a month that are incredible in here. The room is really conducive. The piano's great. I have to admit that, in my mind, I had this vision of Bradley's. I knew, the way Bradley's look with all the dark wood and shit, and the sophistication of the piano room and just the hip thing I remember from Bradley's. That was kind of my vibe. I really was thinking about Bradley's, but everyone jumped on that so fast. Like, you're reopening Bradley's, you're doing Bradley's. And I was kind of like, well, it's not exactly Bradley's, it's, I'm not trying to copy Bradley's,
My read on it was there's a tradition of piano rooms.
Yeah.
That scene was so legendary, people talked about it. As you say, there was something so grown up and adult about it.
Yeah.
And that wasn't around.
Yeah.
So maybe we need that. Like the city needs that.
Well, I mean, that's true what you said. I mean, that was my idea more than Bradley's, was the idea of a piano dual room. Because, I mean, the thing that happened with Mezzrow that took us by surprise very quickly was the nature of the way people were in that room, which was as a listening audience. Because at first I really kind of thought a piano room, people talking, blah, blah, blah. But what happened is whenever I did, and I would do all the solo gigs here in the beginning when there was no, just opening, people were just like sitting in a concert hall. I was like, shit, man, like I have to get on my P's and Q's here. And it raised everyone's level because the shit's a performance. It's not just about some schmaltzy guy playing with a cocktail and a tip thing. It's like, man, this is people sitting in this room listening to you. And then, of course, you have the added pressure of actual musicians coming to listen to you, So it happened like that very fast. And I also kind of purposefully went for a booking policy of trying to get top guys that I could. You know? And I've booked a lot of great pianists here, like I said, Ron Carter's played here, Buster Williams coming in this weekend with Rini Rosnes. Trying to hire the real top guys or really, really good piano players in New York. There's still so many.
Sure.
It's doing fine, though. It's not like ExxonMobil. We're not making a shit ton of money down here. It is operating. I mean, it's synergistic with Smalls. Smalls is like the mama ship, and Mezzrow's still like baby.
Where are you spending most of your time?
I do both. I mean, my days consist of like getting up and working in the office, like on the regular business, day-to-day business shit, and then going home and then coming back to manage from opening till almost close. I have guys that close at both clubs, so I just usually make sure everything's cool at the end and then can split. But it's like on the weekends, Mezzrow, I'm still more kind of trying to make sure Mezzrow is operational. But now I've finally got guys down here that can run this place and know what they're doing. So I'm trying to be back at Smalls too, so I can be in the environment there and make sure everything's correct,
I saw on social media that you were in the Northwest for a few days. What's it like when you step away from the businesses here and just go on the road as a cat? What does that feel like?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, anytime I get a chance to play is great reward. That's one of the things that's happened for me in the last 10 years operating Smalls is that I went from being super neurotic about playing jazz to just like can't wait to touch a piano because all the other shit I'm doing all day, When I finally get to sit down and play, I'm just so there. It's so nice. I mean, I still get a little nervous sometimes, But for the most part, I don't give a shit anymore and just have a good time. But in terms of leaving the businesses for unattended, I can go about 2 weeks max. I just get, I don't like to leave it too long because then I feel like my role is subtle shit. It's like, everything, I have to watch everything that goes down. But for the most part, the thing that I'm most concerned with is the vibe. Like, come in, are we feeling good in here or not? Like, what's happening down here? Is this a dead feeling in here? Why are we dead? What's going on? Where's the vibe here, man? Let's get this session.
And if it is feeling dead or there is no vibe, what can be done?
I have to just figure out, just like reach into my source of energy and put a positive spin on everybody's thing and charge it up. And Smalls is indefatigable, man. It's never it doesn't stop, But sometimes, you got to kick it in the ass a little bit and get a session going, tell guys to get off their asses, pick up their instruments and go out there and play, Some guys are just hanging out too long, not doing shit. Pick up your damn bass, man, go play something. What are you doing here? That kind of thing.
Like I said earlier, the thing that I think about with you particularly that's unlike most club owners or most musicians is that you live in both worlds. Mm-hmm. How have they affected each other? I mean, you fell in love with Scott Joplin when you watched a video as a kid. Here you are talking about live streaming and the server and the subscription model and trying to figure out how to keep the business alive. I mean, how are they supporting each other, those two things? And how has that changed you?
Smalls Jazz Club has a special thing that is love, the love of all these people together for the music, they're each other, the love of drugs and drinking, which is fine, the love of sex, it's fine. That's what life is, it's like, that's what jazz clubs are supposed to be. I value that because for me, it's my environment for my art. If I wasn't a jazz musician, I don't know if I would spend much time in a jazz club, maybe one time. Most people come in once or twice in their lives. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are people who are like, they come for the first time in their life, and that's enough. They're so like, wow, I was in a jazz club in New York, and I heard this incredible, As jazz musicians, we practice all day. Most people never see a guy holding an instrument in their lives. They can't believe it. They might pick up a guitar and play some little thing. If they see a guy with a saxophone doing something like that, it's mind-boggling, The average person, even the most intelligent average person, can't imagine the skill level involved in playing a musical instrument even reasonably well. We live in this world of the highest level musicians of all the times. I value what Smalls is and how it is. My relationship to jazz music has been so personal and so tied into how I feel about myself as a human being. And when I was a younger person, that meant maybe very egotistical, very fragile, not able to take criticism, or not able to face my own shortcomings as an artist or even as a person. Either that or having the attitude when I played that I had to impress, I had to make a great statement or be super hip, I had to play the way that everyone thought was the greatest way to play. I brought all this baggage to the bandstand and it was just not making me play well. With Smalls, like I said, it's a subservient role, like I'm serving my friends who are my musicians and the bars, and I'm paying everybody and I'm making sure everyone's happy, and I have to close it up at the end of the day and open it up in the morning, and it's a burden. So you do the job. But at first for me it was very hard. It was kind of like, damn, I felt humiliated in fact by it. Mm-hmm. I don't take gratification from the money. It's not that much money. I mean, I don't know what a lot of money is, honestly. I don't know what guys think is a lot of money. When I was, when you're a musician, if you pay your rent and eat well, you're making good money. For a guy that's like Donald Trump, it's
right,
pathetic. Even your average business guy maybe wouldn't want to do what we do down here because the bread is so low that it wouldn't be worth half the time, But they don't understand that I'm not being paid in dollars. I'm being paid in other things, spiritual dollars. It's like I get to play my music. And that's what I've always had as my reward. It's like, okay, now I'm running this motherfucker, but guess what? I get to play here once a week. Mm-hmm. That's already a privilege. So now I'm in this position like, oh, he's the guy that owns the club. He gets to play in his own club. All right, he must suck. So
that's a question, right? I mean, that would be my personal hang-up walking onto the bandstand.
Yeah.
Putting that away.
Yeah. But the truth is that anyone that says that doesn't know the history of this music. Because in the history of this music, jazz club owners included Shelly Manne. Jazz club owners included Lucky Roberts. Jazz club owners included Ahmad Jamal. You know, Eddie Condon. I mean, really, like, these were the baddest cats playing, running jazz clubs. You know, Count Basie had his own club. Because running the club is also being able to play really well. It's not just about being a jive motherfucker. In my case, like I said, my commitment has always been to being a serious jazz musician. I'm not trying to just be like a hack or some weekend warrior. I'm committed to really playing. What happened for me with the club is that the pressures of what I have to deal with the club, dealing with musicians, dealing with the day-to-day, the late nights, the bills, the banking, the insurance shit that you have to do, and the city, and problems with guys themselves, it became like I said, when it was time to me actually play the piano, I, for the first time in my life, started yearning for it instead of fearing it. I used to be afraid to play jazz because it meant so much pressure on me from my ego. Now it's just like, damn, I can't wait to play. Holy shit. And then furthermore, I would also just be like, you know, I don't really want to play this fucking Wayne Shorter tune. Or I don't really want to learn how to play in 7/8. You know, I'm not down with it. I don't care.
So did it lead you back towards the impulse that drove you in the first place?
It just allowed me to be me more. Like, I just play more of like whatever the fuck I heard, whatever I felt like. You know, like, hey, I feel like playing this stride piano piece right now. Like, maybe I gotta play like free jazz. I like to play open. You know, it's like, these are some originals, whatever, it didn't matter. And so it allowed me to be much more about Spike Wilner. Also, like I said, my commitment to practicing, my control of the instrument is greater and greater and greater. So I'm in a really good place now musically. People are starting to like my music for the first time, you know, like digging the trio, and I'm getting, you know, some nice things said. And I'm also starting to work more, but I honestly don't care about that much. You know, I like to play when I can chance to play. I like to run these clubs too. You know, both things are important.
Man, I really appreciate you taking time, and this has been just a great conversation.
Cool.
I want to ask you one other thing. On your website, your bio leads with some of your family, and you know, you come from a line of rabbis and Kabbalists, or one Kabbalist and some rabbis. Yeah,
I do actually. According to the family, there was a great rabbi. He had a title. They called him the Chatan Sofer. This was in the time of Napoleon. He was in Pressburg. His real name was Moses Schreiber, which is my actual family name, Schreiber. Wilner was from Vilna, the town, when we came over finally on the boat on my dad's side, whenever that was. They put the name of the town as his last name, and that became his last name.
My name, too, is the same way.
But so common Jewish kind of story, but our real name is Schreiber, which is, it turns out I'm directly in line with Moses Schreiber, Chatan Sofer, and his story was that he was, when he was a young man, he was a prodigy rabbi, and then came in with Nathan Adler, who was the leading Kabbalist of the time, and became his disciple. And then what happened was Nathan Adler was expelled from Frankfurt by the Jewish community for the idea that he was practicing black magic. And he left, and my grandfather decided to go with him, much against the will of his parents. But he ended up going with Nathan Adler, and then spending the next number of years really getting deep in Kabbalah, so God knows what they got into. Then he became a great rabbi and started a huge dynasty, a rabbinical dynasty that exists to this day. But my favorite story about Chatan so far was that he was super powerful and charismatic. He had a great psychic ability. And so this was during the siege of Pressburg by Napoleon, who was bombarding Pressburg, and the Jewish community was, you know, obviously scared, like everyone that lived in Pressburg at that time, because it was under siege. And then it turned out that Napoleon decided to garrison his troops right on the Jewish cemetery out on the outskirts of the town. So he had all these guys with their horses and lighting fires and shitting everywhere, and the Jewish people were outraged, obviously, at the same time scared. And they came to Chatan Sofer and said, hey, Napoleon's putting his troops out on the graveyard there, they're desecrating our graves. What can we do? My grandma says, look, I'll go talk to Napoleon. Let me talk to him. So they're just like, what are you talking about? You can't go talk to Napoleon. He goes, don't worry, I'm going to go talk to Napoleon. Sure enough, he goes and makes an appointment to see Napoleon. And he's led in by guards, and Napoleon and my grandfather meet in privacy, and the guards are gone, and So the story goes, like, about 45 minutes went by, nothing. Everyone's just like, what the fuck? You know, it's like a Jewish rabbi and Napoleon, who pretty bitter anti-Semite for the most part, like, you know, also, you know, madman, emperor of the world. So the doors open and Napoleon's got his arm around my grandfather, like patting him on the back, and they shake hands warmly. And my grandfather goes home, and sure enough, next day, all the troops are moved off the cemetery. People are like, what the hell did you say? You know, like, how did you do that? Like, what?
Yeah.
How did you convince him to do that? And incredible, that's a true story. So
part of being a rabbi, this may be a stretch, but part of being a rabbi is to be at the front of a community, somebody that unifies people and gives them a reason to come together.
Indeed.
And reminds them why they came together.
Yeah. Well, I have an even further thought on the whole matter, if you don't mind. It may sound insane, but I do believe that my grandfather, generations back, might have created a Kabbalistic spell that would create a future version of himself to lead a new people into a free world of religious thinking, a new kind of way to, you know, just live in community. So I think that may have manifested in myself in a weird way.
You think it's you?
Well, it would, you know, it's. I shouldn't say that it is or it isn't, but it would make a lot of sense. Because the thing is, it's like you said, jazz is like a religion. It really is. It's religious people.
It is like a religion.
It's
sure.
also like a monastery. It's also like the monks and the laity, and there's senior masters and there's neophytes. And I believe, if properly administered, that jazz music could be the saving grace of humanity, because it's just, music is a language that communicates to all humans equally, that can hear it. You know, like, it's a language of, it can be the key to world peace, because you can communicate wordlessly. The people that hear jazz are all over the world. It's everywhere you go, you'll find jazz people. In China, all over Europe, Japan, South America, you know, anyone, even if they've never been to New York, never heard, the people that can hear that come together for that. That's why I think, and jazz is so well suited for that task, because it's not, you know, it's not like just anger, rock, sex, you know,
emotion.
It's not even like that. It's about subtle shit, gentler things, romantic things that are still much, much more human than people, like, you know. So perhaps that's the mission. I should probably keep my mouth shut, but that's true.
I mean, I dig it. I can appreciate it for sure.
Some part of me, I'm just joking around too, but thank you for the interview.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Okay.
There you have it, Spike Wilner talking about the gentler, subtler things. Or maybe we're just joking around. Spike Wilner left it all on the stage with this one. If you like this episode, I think you might enjoy my previous conversations with music promoter George Wein, innovative guitarist Charlie Hunter, pianist Larry Goldings, or restaurateur Gabe Stulman, all of whom have illuminating ideas about these same questions. I'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.